Hello, and welcome to another episode of Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali. You know, control is a big thing with us parents. How much control is too much control, and how little control is too little control? I cannot tell you how many times parents come to me trying to balance the art of having some presence in their children's lives, but not overdoing it and not underdoing it. Well, there is no perfect answer, is there? But I can tell you there is one secret ingredient that determines how we control our children or not. And I will be talking about that in this episode. Coming up next, a mother whose 6-year-old has been struggling with anxiety for the past 3 years. Joining me now is Colette, a mother who is struggling with her 6-year-old's anxiety and selective mutism. Hi, Colette. Tell us what's going on.
Hi. So since my daughter was about 3 years old, we noticed when she first started preschool that she wasn't talking to any of her peers or the teachers in class. And this went on for about 2 years. So for 2 years, she didn't say anything. She could talk at home. She was very lively and expressive and like a real fun character. But as soon as she would get to school or in groups of friends and like social circles, then she would literally freeze and shut down and not say a word. Even friends that she'd known for years and years, since birth, she wouldn't talk to because of the anxiety. So we did work with a therapist who specialized in selective mutism. And now she started kindergarten this year and she is talking, which is huge for us. And she's made friends and she responds when the teacher asks her questions, which things 2 years ago we thought we would never be where we are. But right now, the issue that we're having with the anxiety is she's not using the bathroom without me. So she won't go at school. She will hold it from when we drop her off at 7:30 all the way through till the end of the school day at 2:30. And that's for anything, number one or number two. She won't even go into the restroom. It causes her too much anxiety. She'll hold it and wait until she comes home. And yeah, I just feel like that's a long time for a little girl, and being uncomfortable during those hours, it must be stressful for her.
Yes.
You know, I want to help her so that she can overcome this like she did with the speaking.
Okay, so what's wonderful is that you've been able to really witness something that was such a big deal a few years ago, and now your child has slowly but surely grown out of it. So I want you to keep that jewel that you just got from your child, because many of us parents lose perspective, right? When something is catastrophic in front of us, we feel as if it is the end of the world. We feel as if this hard moment is going to last forever. So you just went through a really challenging phase with your daughter where every parent would have freaked out, but now your daughter grew out of it. You know, selective mutism is very common in early childhood, especially when children feel, almost frozen in shock. And it typically occurs during unfamiliar, unknown situations. So it's not unusual that children like your daughter experience great anxiety in new situations like preschool or their first transition in any new, environment. So what she went through was a normal desire to protect herself. Maybe somebody in the school humiliated her or bullied her or said something to her, and she completely froze. The truth is, in our modern Western world, we're sending our children off to new situations way too early. Right? We're sending them in pre-nursery and kindergarten when they're very, very young. And many children are not ready to regulate themselves in these new environments. In the olden days, right, when we lived in tribes, there was always a familiar, soothing caregiver around. We had our mothers around all the time. So this is a new phenomenon, and many of our children cannot cope. And sometimes their anxiety makes them freeze, and then some of them display selective mutism. So what I'm saying is that you've experienced that, she's grown out of it. She's now less anxious. Well, another typical way that our children show their anxiety is by withholding their poop. right? This is one of their things. And the reason they withhold their poop, again, is because they're seeking control and to protect themselves. So let me ask you, when she used to be selectively mute and when she withholds her poop, what is mommy's level of anxiety around these issues internally? Like, what all are you experiencing internally?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And as a follower of your work, I have been questioning myself, why is this a trigger for me? Especially with the speaking, it felt like she didn't respond to people. It felt like it was very dismissive of the people. And as a people pleaser myself, I'm like, come on, you've got to answer that question. So I realized that was my trigger. But then accepting that and accepting she doesn't need to respond to them. She doesn't know them. Maybe she doesn't like them. And letting her be in her discernment over who she was ready to open up to and who she was ready to respond to. I stopped putting the pressure on that 100% and accepted this is my daughter. Would be at a party if she doesn't want to participate like the other kids and she would rather observe. She's allowed to observe. Not all the children want to participate. So that was definitely a realization on my end that she doesn't need to be like me.
Oh my goodness. So let's just stop right there because I want every listener to really absorb your words of wisdom. Number one, you looked within yourself. Now, that itself is like the hardest thing for parents to do. So bravo. You looked within yourself and asked, why is this triggering me so much? I want every human listening to this to remind themselves that this is where we begin the work by asking ourselves, why am I being triggered in this way? Instead of blaming the trigger, we look within. The next thing you did is you began to identify all the ways you wanted her to be like you. And because you are such a people pleaser and because you like to be socially appropriate and follow the norms, when you saw your daughter act in a way that wasn't quote unquote pleasing, it triggered your good girl image of who she should be and of who you are. And then the third thing is you released her into her own unfolding. You allowed her to be her own human. And in doing that, you gave her such an amazing gift. So I just want every listener out there to know that you too can do this process. You too can release your children to become their most empowered selves. Okay, now tell me about your triggers around her withholding her poop.
So I have questioned this, and I'm not sure I've got the exact answer. I do feel like I worry for her comfort, and that's triggering me, that she would be stressed at school because she needs to go and she can't relieve herself. And this is also for pee. So, with myself, I use the bathroom frequently throughout the day, and I think maybe that's a trigger that if I had to hold it from 7:30 till 2:30, I would be bursting and I would be uncomfortable. I would be very, very stressed. So maybe that's where it's triggering me that she would be feeling that in a classroom, but then be frozen and not advocate for herself and not feel like she could go and relax and relieve herself.
Yes. So now what I'm about to say may be challenging for you and perhaps for listeners out there. When our children withhold their poop and their pee, especially when they're young, like your daughter, it's typically their way of saying, I don't have much control over my life. I cannot control what's happening outside of me. I'm going to control my elimination and my food. So typically it's what they eat and what they eliminate. In your daughter's case, it's just the elimination, right? She's not controlling her food, correct?
Yeah, right. That's correct.
So she's chosen to control the few things that children can control, which is their own bodily functions. So now let's go a little deeper, and here's where it could be a little bit icky for you. What about your control? Are you somebody who is a perfectionist, who does control herself a lot, who demands that, she live at her best levels and in a perfectionistic way? Do you think you have those issues inside your psychology?
I imagine I do. Yeah. I feel like in some ways I'm totally not a perfectionist, but I think in the way I hold myself to very high standards for myself could be perfectionism.
If you could go back to your childhood and think of the first, really painful memory and go to that moment, we could discover more about how you are affecting your daughter. Can you think of the first painful moment that comes to mind?
I can. And the reason I'm kind of smiling is I can see the connection. It's around vomiting. I had a real issue that what I had done was a very terrible thing when I first threw up at the age of 3.
Wow.
And that definitely stayed with me through my life, where I might have even had tendencies of emetophobia, which is the phobia of vomiting. So it's all connected with elimination, I guess.
Yeah, isn't that funny? You went straight back to a real body trauma. Now, you vomited, and listen, many children who vomit or poop or have diarrhea, and I know this sounds kind of like, why are we talking about this? Because this is real stuff and children go through this stuff. When they go through that, it scares them because they've never perhaps vomited before. So do you remember how your mother reacted to you or how the others around you reacted when you vomited? Because why were you so scared?
Yeah, so my parents were out and we had a babysitter. And I have 3 older sisters, and they were so grossed out by what had happened. I think the babysitter was like scrambling to try and help it not to turn into a mess. And then my parents had to be called and told that I was unwell and they needed to come home from their night out. So I felt a lot of guilt and shame that they had to leave the fun that they were having because of something that I had done.
Yeah. So just there in a core memory, you registered that you were quote unquote bad, you were out of control, you were so gross. I mean, imagine how a 3-year-old feels when they vomit and now they're being told that they are gross people or that's gross. You begin to feel that, oh, if all this stuff that came out of me is gross, I must be gross. And you felt some sort of shame. How do you think that shame or feeling of, trying to be perfect lasted through your life? Did you see it come up in other places in your life as well?
I imagine, yeah. I mean, now that's definitely something I'm going to be thinking about. Yeah.
Like, for example, let me help you. When as young children, we're told that we're gross or we're not amazing enough, and then we seek to be better and better, it typically shows up in how we appear in public, right? How we show up in our hair, in our clothes, in how we keep the house. In your example, with your child, it was how your child greets other people because you see her as an extension of yourself. So do you see how that control can come out in the way you show up in the world?
Yeah, 100%. I think even though maybe on the surface, I feel, like, oh, I'm just winging it and throwing it all together. I think at the core, it's coming from a place of control and perfectionism.
Yeah, and I wonder if somehow you're not fully in touch with that, but your daughter is picking up on that. She is feeling the need to be perfect. So let me explain. As a young 3-year-old, it's funny, right? When did she start preschool?
At 3.
Yeah, it's so interesting that your first memory is 3.
Yes. Oh my God.
And let me tell you, patterns repeat themselves very exact in generations. They kind of show up at the same age. So now your daughter's 3 years old. She goes to school. It's quite likely somebody said something to her that hurt her feelings and made her feel gross or icky or not good enough. And she too kind of froze like you did when you vomited and somebody made fun of you. She too kind of froze and then just decided not to show herself in a vulnerable way again because she didn't feel comfortable. However, that is also something she probably feels at home. The need to be in control, the need to be kind of a perfect little girl. And she's feeling that pressure. And that's the pressure that is leading her to not want to poop freely or not want to, quote unquote, have an accident, right? So it's all related to control issues. So the more we as parents become aware of our own control issues, our own sense of perfectionism, we can then see, oh, this is how my daughter's picking up on it. This is how my son is mirroring me. But that requires you as the parent to really get in touch with your own issues around perfectionism. I can tell you that your daughter is sensing some pressure to be perfect. She's trying to control. And that's because she's feeling a loss of control in her life now. You also have a younger child. How old is your younger daughter or son?
Son, yeah, he's 2.5.
This loss of control could be related to the fact that mommy is busy with the new child and mommy doesn't have enough time, or mommy is stressed out. So these are the issues which kind of feed into our children's anxiety issues, and we need to become aware of it. What I would recommend as a concrete strategy and a practice for your child is to, poop in front of her. Like, take her to the bathroom with you when you're pooping. Show her how much fun you have pooping, and you put on the music, and you chilling out, and you're then going for a bath, and you're loving your body, and you're splashing and making a mess. What I want her to see is that it's okay to love your body. It's okay to be messy. The more you make mistakes around your daughter and show her that you're totally relaxed about it, all of this will ease her into allowing herself to poop easier. Now, I know a listener out there may be wondering, how does making a mess relate to pooping? Because it's a control issue we're talking about. And when we are very controlled and don't like to make a mess, our children translate that to the pressure to be perfect. And they then control whatever little they can control in an effort to be perfect. So she's trying not to make a mess, you see. She's trying not to make mistakes. So she muted herself, and now she's muting her natural body functions. So the more mommy is relaxed, making mistakes, being silly, pooping with her, bathing with her, laughing with her, all of that will ease her anxieties.
I wanted to ask you a question about the perfectionism, because I feel that I'm not demanding that of her, so like she can do her homework and get things wrong, or it can look messy, or I want her to do it the way she's going to do it. I want her to dress the way she wants to dress, even though sometimes it's questionable, her hair the way she wants to do it, and really give her that freedom to express herself in the way that is natural to her, without any expectation of her hair having to be perfect, or her outfit having to be just so, or her homework having to be correct. And so I don't feel it's something I'm necessarily projecting onto her, but is it something that she's witnessing through the way I conduct myself?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Literally perfect.
Literally perfect. So do you think you're hard on yourself?
Yes.
How do you think you're hard on yourself? Tell me.
So growing up as the youngest of 4 girls, I never felt I was as good as them, because they were all older. There was a 10-year age difference, and, they were always in a different stage of life that I would look up to and feel like I wasn't there yet. So I wasn't as good as them. And I was annoying being the youngest. I think now we're all very close, good friends, but growing up, maybe I wasn't as accepted because of my age and, the immaturity that came with that. So I always feel like now, I don't want to annoy anyone. I don't want to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. So we'll try to, behave what I feel would be appropriate to be accepted and belong. And I think that's where I'm hard on myself, because it's like I'm always expecting the worst of myself, or that others would think the worst of me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you just hit it right now. You just hit your core pain. And here's the thing. Our children will pick up on our pain no matter how we are with them through our words. And the way we are with ourselves will show up in our parenting. Your relationship to yourself is going to show up in your relationship to your child, even though you're saying the right words. You're hard on yourself, and your daughter is hard on herself. But here's the invitation: to break the pattern, to enjoy, to laugh, to be silly, to allow yourself to not fit in, and to, love yourself through it all, and to accept all your weaknesses and limitations. When mommy is comfortable with herself, you will see that your daughter will be more comfortable with herself as well.
Wow. I did not think we were going to go this deep today.
Well, that's what we do here.
But yeah, that's huge.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you for being vulnerable. I know you've taken away an aha moment that now you can reflect on and begin to be very aware of And each time that desire to be perfect or that inner critic shows up, you're going to love yourself and accept yourself. Thank you again for joining us.
Wow, thank you so much.
Coming up next, a mother who's struggling with her 15-year-old daughter who she says doesn't want to live in the home. Joining me now is Kari. Kari is struggling with her 15-year-old daughter who she says stays away from the house at least 4 or 5 nights a week. And that's really bothering Kari and she doesn't know what to do. Here's Kari. Welcome. Tell us what's really going on.
Hi, yes, thank you. She's staying at friends. She says she's just wanting to have fun as a teen and be various friends, and now it's a boyfriend. And it's gotten to a stage where it feels like it's been quite a while now. And I feel like I never see her and I feel sad. And we get along really great and she's a fantastic kid. I'm sort of in the dark about what might be going on with her.
How long has she been doing this, staying away?
It feels like it's nearly like 2 years of her coming and going.
Right. It's almost as if she's flown the coop earlier than most kids do, don't you think?
It feels like that. It feels like, yeah, she's acting kind of like she's already an adult and she can just come and go and she's, already beyond 18. And
yeah. I know so many of our teenagers like to believe that they're older than they are and they are seeking independence. And yet we know as adults that they're not yet ready for such a level of independence. So let me ask you, how do you tell her that, hey, you know what? This is your house. I need you home. And it's best for you that you sleep in the house and I see you. And then when you're older, you can do all of this. Do you feel comfortable laying that boundary with her?
Yeah, I think I'd try. We have those conversations and she's in agreement and we are in contact the whole time. But I think it just somehow, she's just so busy that somehow it doesn't come around to being more time at home and she's quite busy.
Do you feel that confronting her with real clear boundaries is something that creates anxiety in you?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's been a big issue with my parenting. Yeah.
Are you a single parent?
Uh-huh.
So talk more about what about creating boundaries makes you anxious.
I've never wanted to have many rules or boundaries. I think I've just got the very basic boundary of when it comes to, I think, harming yourself type thing. I've always sort of wanted, kids to be quite free and not feel like they've been controlled or anything. But I think it's kind of swung the other way somehow and it's gone pear-shaped somehow. And I'm not really sure how it led to this.
Yeah, I really appreciate your being so honest because, many times when parents come to me, they are actually the opposite of you, right? They're very controlling, very strict, and they don't like when they're not always around their children. And I have to remind them that that's their anxiety. But here's the thing, when we swing the other way, like you have, and we have such few boundaries, so much so that our 15-year-old, 14, 13, like this has been going on for 2 years, when they don't even come home and they're actually mostly living outside the house, that's the other side of control. You're still talking about anxiety. It just looks very different for you. It's still anxiety at the bottom of it all. The parent who is super controlling, that's actually an anxious parent. But a parent like you who's very permissive, it looks like you're not anxious, but so much permissiveness on the other end of the spectrum is also your anxiety. So let's go there. I understand you wanted to raise free children and you wanted to give children a lot of room to breathe and space to grow. That's a beautiful sentiment. But your child is actually not even staying at home. And she's really being raised by her peers. She's really being raised by other children or other adults. So what is it about you confronting that reality that makes you so anxious? Can you share that with us?
I'm not quite sure I'm in touch with that. Maybe it's not knowing what to do if it's refused or if it's if it's not acknowledged. It could be fear of conflict. I'm not really sure.
I think it is. I think it is fear of conflict because somehow I think you have created a situation for yourself where she started this at 13, she's now 15, where you're communicating to her that it's okay if you're not around. It's okay if we're not physically connected. And texting her during the day, that's not the same as your presence. I think at the bottom of it all is that you're afraid to be present in her life. And in a way, it's kind of convenient for you to not have to deal with her every single day. And I know that's harsh. So let's just explore that with some courage. What about that feels right or wrong? Tell me.
I think to an extent it is like that in some ways. I wouldn't say completely, because I think she's not such a difficult kid that I can't handle it at all. We're very loving towards each other still, and I don't know.
Right, but it's almost like you've hung your hat so early in the game. Like you've decided that, you know what? She may not need me. And I think it speaks to your own insecurity about how important you really are in her life. I think you're discounting your own importance in her life and relevance. And she needs you.
Yeah. And I think she recently did say that, exactly that. And even though I thought I was there, and that's when she was present at the home, she said she needed me then. And I didn't realize that I missed that.
I think on some level, something about raising your daughter scares you. I think you're running away, you're avoiding something. And I think it comes from your own insecurity. Something is making you very scared to take charge, to be your daughter's parent. You've kind of just retired yourself early in the game.
Oh, okay. How do I turn that around? Because I don't want that.
Well, you don't want that, right? You want to be present for your daughter. You want to be there.
Yeah.
Well, then how are you communicating that to her?
Maybe I'm not communicating. I thought I was communicating it. I became maybe such at a loss that, like, I don't ask her every day to be home, but maybe I should be asking her to be home every day.
It's okay. You're confused about your role in her life. You're confused about your parenting, and there's something you're avoiding. Let me ask you, did you have a close relationship with your parents?
Close, but maybe a little bit difficult.
Did you feel the warmth of your mother and her presence in your life?
Definitely the presence and being cared for. Yeah, I did.
Did you feel connected to her growing up, or your father connected to them?
Maybe not as much connection as I would have hoped.
There's a disconnection going on, and there's some avoiding going on. You are avoiding being the parent she needs you to be. You're kind of scared to be that. You're running away from her. She's not actually running away from the home. You've kind of run away from your role. And she's like, okay, I'm a kid. I have more fun somewhere else, so I'll just go where I have fun. But she's missing a very key ingredient, which is a parent who asserts her presence and is connected and is there. And she's being raised by other children, and I don't think you want that.
No. But what does that look like? Does the parent who's not that, is that texting her every day to require her to be home?
Well, it requires a parent to say, hey, you're a kid. You're not ready to go out there and sleep in other people's homes 4 or 5 nights a week. This is your home. I need you to be here, and I need to check in on you. And this is where you need to be. But you've kind of been conflict avoidant, I think, and boundary avoidant. I think it scares you.
Yeah.
I think you're anxious around creating that, importance of who you are in her life. I think it comes from your insecurity. Like, okay, she's okay. I don't think I have anything to offer. And you're not realizing that your child needs the mother to be there. And even if it's just to tuck her in at night and give her a kiss and tell her she's beautiful and encourage her, you're missing a lot of precious time where you can be such an amazing presence for her. But you don't believe that you are an amazing presence. See, that's where you're coming from, that I'm not even that important, so who cares if she doesn't get me?
Yeah, because I felt like the times I've tried to talk to her about it, I have said these things, her response has been, but I don't want a parent. And so maybe I've taken that to be that I've been too much for her in some ways. And so I have to tone back a bit.
Right. But just because a child says, I don't want a parent, almost every child will say that. What they're saying is, hey, I think I'm amazing and I can do things on my own. But that doesn't mean we check out. I feel like when she said, I don't want a parent, you took that literally and you just ejected. We're like, okay, I want her to like me. I think it's coming from an anxiety around wanting to be liked and be your child's friend, rather than stepping into the role of mother and caretaker and really being the leader right now. I think it scares you. She scares you in some way. And you're afraid that if she doesn't like you or if she doesn't think of you as a cool person, then that's going to feel really hard for you. But in that, you're taking care of yourself. You're not really stepping into the role of mother right now. So as I say that, what is going on in your body? What are you thinking?
The practicalities of trying to keep her home when she just wants to, she'll just sneak out the door, and before I realize she's going out quite late, and, you know.
You haven't created any accountability. There's no accountability to you. I mean, I think you've been so afraid of being controlling that you've swung all the way to the other side, and you're now so permissive. It's like there's no parent in the house.
Oh, yeah. So making her accountable, how do I do that?
Yeah. So I just want you to know that children need safety, and letting her run the streets and sleep at different people's houses at this young age is not healthy for her. And she's missing out on so many moments with her sister, with you, right? You said to our producers, you have a younger daughter.
Yeah.
The feeling of a home, the feeling of coming back to a little nest of safety. And she's grown up too fast, too soon, and it is going to have a consequence.
Yeah.
Okay, so now how do we do this? How do we turn back the clock and make some changes? Well, the first thing is you need to perhaps go with her to a therapist or a coach, because this is something that you need to learn to do. You don't know how to create boundaries with her. You've literally told her, it's free for all, do what you like, sleep wherever you like. And she's in charge. But a 13 or a 15-year-old cannot be in charge of so much freedom. It's not healthy for them. They need some containment. I always say that the two wings of the dove of parenting are authenticity. They need an authentic presence, but they also need containment. They need connection, but they also need containment. So right now you don't have really either of them. So how do we start? I would start by telling her that you are concerned, that you would like her to be home more often. You have to start small, maybe 3 nights a week she's home, and that you want to do things with her. You want to spend time with her, and you think that maybe a therapist will help to rebuild that connection with her.
Yeah, I've lined that up, which is good.
And she's agreed?
Oh gosh, not yet.
Yeah. So what I want you to know is that you have swung the other side from control to absolute loss of control. You have given up all your, parental governance. You've given up anything over her, the oversight, the potential for connection. And I think it's a wake-up call to you that you need to really step into the role of parent and not be so anxious. It's coming from your anxiety. So getting a therapist to help you or a coach to help you will be the first place to start, but also holding your daughter accountable to coming home.
Yeah. And thank you.
Yeah, I think it's time to now step into that role a little bit more assertively.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, we can't avoid being a parent. We can't outsource being a parent so early. Our children need us, and they need us to need us. It's okay for you to step into that and ask her to show up more so that you two can be connected. And there are very few years left before she's going to go off to college. So this is the time that her mother steps in and shows her that she's very invested in being her mother.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, my dear, thank you so much for sharing. What a difficult situation, but I'm confident that you're going to turn the tide.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being so vulnerable.
Thank you. I'm very appreciative.
Wow, just so interesting hearing from both these parents today. So at different ends of the spectrum of control. One parent so invested in how her child acts and wants to be the perfect mother, trying to micromanage almost everything her daughter does. And then we have another parent who so doesn't want to be controlling that they swing to the other side and they almost become absent, like they're not even there. I see this so often in my practice. And in fact, I wrote about this in my book, The Parenting Map. I talk about the different parenting styles, the styles we adopt out of our anxiety. Sometimes we're so anxious, like the typical controlling parent, that we really ride our children, or we ride ourselves trying to be the perfect parent. And I call those parents the fighter parents or the fixer parents. And then somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, I have the feigner parents, where they're feigning being perfect or they're faking a perfect family. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have the freezer parents or the fleer parents. And that second parent talked about how she has kind of dissociated from her child and the parenting role. So no matter where you are on the spectrum, it's really important for us as parents to go within ourselves and ask, what is my anxiety causing me to do? If we're not aware of how our anxiety is causing us to be either super controlling or super not controlling, we won't get to the crux of the matter and our children will suffer. In order to best connect with our children, we as parents need to first tune in, tap in, look within, and get in touch with our underlying anxiety, because that's what's going to show up the most in our parenting. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, share it with those you love, and I will see you on the next episode of Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali. Parenting and You with Dr. Shefali is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional medical, psychological, psychotherapeutic, coaching, healthcare, or other qualified professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment.